Lots of things going on in the world of pro wrestling, so today I got you covered. It's your boy Ango. This is DestinationPW. If you guys want more videos like this, go ahead and let me know. Drop a comment down below. Click that subscribe button. Ring the bell. This way you'll get notified every time a new video gets uploaded on the channel. All right, guys, first story. Chris Jericho, very outspoken of WWE lately, but something in particular was brought up. And I got to be honest with you guys, it kept me scratching my head. Chris Jericho was talking to Andrew Yang, the former Democratic presidential candidate, and they were talking on Talk is Jericho, Chris Jericho's podcast, and they were talking about some of the bad business practices going on in the world of pro wrestling. But something very, very interesting caught my attention, and that is the fact that Chris Jericho does not get paid for any of his matches that are on the WWE network. Now, this is very interesting considering that the WWE network has a plethora of content featuring some of the best and worst WWE superstars in history. But of course, there is a huge catalog of pay-per-views and dark matches, and I mean, there's just so much content on the WWE network. You would assume that someone like Chris Jericho would get paid for it, but when he did this podcast with Andrew Yang, he mentions that he doesn't even get a dime for any royalties, despite being featured pretty prominently on the WWE network. Now, I always find this to be a very, very concerning issue because WWE, the way that their business model is, obviously with live shows and television, a lot of people are using streaming services as a replacement for television. So the fact that someone like Chris Jericho doesn't get paid a dime, something is very, very weird about that. And Andrew Yang also says that if Joe Biden were to be president, we can expect a lot of change. A lot of people believe that Andrew Yang may be a front runner for the Secretary of Labor position. Well, I don't want to talk politics. This channel is not about politics, but it would be very interesting to see what kind of changes would be made, what kind of changes we can expect in the future. And that all really depends on a lot of things, like I said. So I don't want to talk the politics portion of it, but is this something that will actually change? That's something that I find to be very interesting. And I don't know if we will actually ever see the change happen from WWE internally, but you just simply never know in a situation like this. Now, for one, I always believed that if you were featured on the WWE network, you were being paid for it. I don't know if this is something that's being renegotiated in contracts or however it may be, but Chris Jericho is not somebody that is a nobody. I mean, Chris Jericho is a big name in the world of pro wrestling, and I just find it to be very odd that WWE doesn't have a system in place where somebody like Chris Jericho gets paid. Now, I don't know how the specifics of the financials would work, but of course, like I said, streaming is taking away from television. Some people are only watching WWE and AEW just through YouTube clips and Twitter highlights. So some people rather not pay a $50 cable bill, but they don't mind paying $10 for the WWE network. At the end of the day, I feel like all WWE superstars should be able to get something out of that, right? Okay, nonetheless, we have another story for the day, and this one I find to be very interesting because it also doesn't make sense. We are talking about Erick Redbeard. That's the only part that doesn't make sense, but what's really cool is Erick Rowan from WWE is back in pro wrestling. If you guys didn't know, Erick Rowan is going by the name Erick Redbeard. I just think the name doesn't make sense, quite honestly. But nonetheless, Erick Rowan is back in pro wrestling, and he's actually participating in the United Wrestling Network tournament to crown the first ever UWN champion. Now, for some of you who are watching this video, if you guys didn't know, UWN is a David Marquez production in collaboration with the NWA. So right now, NWA Power is kind of in limbo due to the COVID pandemic, but nonetheless, the NWA is staying very active in the world of pro wrestling. They are doing this weekly pay-per-view type show on Fight TV with the UWN, and what's really cool is Erick Rowan is competing in the tournament to crown the first ever world champion. Now, Erick Rowan, of course, was rumored to debut in AEW at some point during the COVID pandemic after he was released by WWE. However, those plans look to have been scrapped. So now it looks like Erick Redbeard. Again, the name doesn't make sense, and I absolutely hate it. but it looks like he will finally be featured once again on a pro wrestling television show. Now, what's really cool with the NWA, their title belts are also defended on this weekly television show. The Pope also just became the television champion. So, of course, there's a lot of cool things happening with the NWA, despite the fact that Power isn't being uploaded weekly on YouTube. We don't really know what the future plans are for NWA, but I definitely want to talk about this because I think Erick Rowan is somebody who improved massively towards his end of the run in WWE. And of course, with WWE no longer having Erick Rowan, and of course AEW not having Erick Rowan, this is a good opportunity for Eric Redbeard to make a name once again in the world of pro wrestling. And I'm going to go out and say that he is my favorite to win the world championship. There are quite a few names in this tournament that are appealing, but I think Eric Redbeard is somebody who right now can show the world that he could be a top guy in a wrestling promotion. And I know that sounds silly to some wrestling fans because he wasn't the most popular pro wrestler in WWE, let alone in his actual faction. But I do think with that size, the look, the talent that he has as a big man, I think that's important. I think pro wrestling has kind of gotten away from it. So I am very intrigued to see what happens with him and the NWA and the UWN. And yeah, he's my pick for the world championship. So me personally, I would love to see him win. I think what we're going to end up seeing is him versus Chris Dickinson in the semifinals. And then, of course, Eric Redbeard gets the win. But yeah, the name, I don't know. Not a big fan of it. Nonetheless, it is what it is. That's the cards he was dealt. But I'm very intrigued to see what happens there. And for the final story of the day, we have some AEW news. If you guys haven't been watching AEW, something that has really stood out to me as probably some of the best content in pro wrestling is the new faction involving Eddie Kingston, Pentagon Jr., I don't even know what they're calling him anymore in AEW, Phoenix, and then, of course, you have the Blade and the Butcher. If you guys didn't know, Eddie Kingston now has a new member as part of the faction, and I'm not really sure why AEW made this decision just out of nowhere, but AEW has announced that the Bunny has joined the faction. Now, the reason why this is actually a very big deal is because, well, AEW is somewhat inconsistent here. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, the Bunny, aka Allie, was part of the Nightmare Sisters. She was part of the Nightmare family. And just like that, she's back to being the Bunny. Now, I wish she was just included from the start because, well, if I gotta be honest with you, the Blade, the Butcher, the Bunny, I mean, like it just all, I mean, that's just kind of how they were introduced to the AEW audience. So me personally, I think it's just like, you know, everything kind of happened out of nowhere. When she joined the Nightmare family, they kind of had this storyline with QT Marshall, but there was just a really weird build for that particular storyline. And now that she's joining this faction, it's just happening out of nowhere. I think it makes sense. I love the idea of having a female in the group. And personally, what I really want to see long-term storytelling, I want to see this group, this new faction that has been formed, and it continues to grow. I want to see this faction take on the Dark Order, and I think it makes a lot of sense when you consider somebody like Anna Jay being part of the Dark Order. I think obviously having, you know, Allie as part of this group, I just think it just could be some really good storytelling, and to me, I'm very intrigued by that idea. So I'm not sure what we'll see going forward, but I hope AEW decides to put the two together, two heel groups. It just makes a lot of sense in this situation. But Eddie Kingston's new group is sweet. I think Eddie Kingston is the MVP, and he more than likely is the next one to compete against Jon Moxley. So I'm very intrigued by it. I want to know what you guys think. All three news stories seem to be very interesting. Do you guys like the new format of this channel? Let me know, and I'll see you guys next time right here on Destination PW.